Hey everyone, this is Ciarán from paternity leave, I guess. Can't keep me away. Everything's good, everything's happy and healthy. Just walking with the dogs. I just got my thoughts on things. God, what can I say? This ceasefire, fucking miserable affair. I think most people listening would recognise that it's bullshit, that it won't hold, that this will just be a repositioning of long-standing campaign that goes back years of extermination, and it'll just be like Oslo again. They'll just be like, oh, we did everything anyway, we're just cutting off all their electricity and clean water and food and whatever. It sucks. It is being used as a justification to stop any of the kind of like attempts to isolate Israel on the wider stage. Seeing that particularly with the Eurovision stuff, the European Broadcasting Union, the kind of like central body in charge of Eurovision, has basically suspended the vote that was meant to happen late this month, early November, I think early November, to kick Israel out of Eurovision. This was happening because, both behind and in front of the scenes, countries like Ireland, Slovenia, well, let's do it in order. Slovenia, Ireland, Spain, Iceland, Netherlands actually I think comes in there somewhere before those couple of those countries were all complaining, and behind the scenes we kind of suspect Belgium and Finland and a handful of others are also complaining. Poland also seems to be one that's complaining as well, which I find kind of interesting. But yeah, so they're all being like, I think, kind of told to jog on. They suspended this vote. Austrian media saying the vote is just completely cancelled. They're just going to have, the official story is they're just going to have the vote as part of the General Assembly in December. But I don't know. I think this is a part of the rat fucking and pretending that this kind of shambolic, farcical ceasefire where, we acknowledge genocide without any genocides happens or whatever. All that farcical stuff is used as justification to say, it's all fine. And I'd be very curious to see polling, if there is any polling, but I generally don't believe that everyone who's pissed at Israel on the European continent is going to be suddenly fine with them. I just don't think that's going to happen. So yeah, see what's happening there. Another thing that I'd like to talk about that I promise has a wider implication, even though it is a bit Irish-centric, is an interesting thing happening with our presidential election. I know some better podcasters than me will say, I don't want to predict the future. You never predict the future. It's a bad idea. But I love doing it because what the fuck is the point otherwise? Just have a little bit of fun. We have two candidates in our presidential race at the moment. We have, representing Fine Gael, we have Heather Humphreys. Heather Humphreys is a Presbyterian from Ulster. She's from Monaghan. But it's notable, Protestant. Isn't that kind of interesting? People are like, oh yeah, it's kind of interesting, whatever. Anyway, her husband's in the Orange Order, so that's something. And her father and her grandfather were also big time players in the Orange Order, for anyone who doesn't know, a heavily sectarian organisation that basically prided itself on trying to make sure that Ireland was never independent, the Catholics never had rights, etc. So people are like, hey, that's kind of fucked up. On the other side, we have Catherine Connolly, independent, who has got the broad support of every party you could reasonably called left-wing, including some that I think have portrayed their credentials, like Labour and the Green Party. Anyway, goes without saying there has been an aggressive smear campaign against Catherine Connolly, and I do think it shows something interesting. Because the smear campaign has been kind of non-stop, it exists in the media, it exists on a lot of social media. If you go on to whenever I dare to log back into my Twitter and go to the For You page, the kind of algorithmic one, it's filled with a bunch of melts talking about Catherine Connolly being a friend of Russia and whatever. And her polling just keeps going up and up and up. So, because people who listen to her kind of recognize she's a very genuine person, she thinks about what she says, etc. What I do find interesting is, and what I think is like, a wider lesson that can be taken from this is possibly death of social media. So Irish mainstream media has always been a weird one because it has this problem of constantly looking to the UK and US. I think I mentioned it before of like the Irish Times were running these ads that were like, oh, tune into the Irish Times, or like read the Irish Times to get all the best coverage of the US presidential election. This is the last election. And it's like, why? Why would I do that? Like, there's not a language barrier. I can just read American sources and get opinions and analysis from people who don't just holiday in the same 5 American cities every so often. So they've always had this kind of thing of like being a little too looking towards other countries and not towards themselves. So I think a lot of people just kind of deem them a little bit irrelevant. I think they always had a problem with like having actual sway over the Irish population. Then, well, who informs people's life politics and takes other than lived experience? Let's not forget lived experience. Like social media, like, okay, yeah, Ireland's far right, for example, which is kind of ascendant, comes entirely out of like Facebook groups and chat groups and WhatsApp groups that were kind of formed during the pandemic as kind of like local kind of response teams, what's happening in my neighborhood, etc. But then I'm pretty confident claiming this, that some confidence man has definitely like sold to someone in Ireland this idea of a social media influence campaign against Connolly. Because we're seeing that so aggressively on X.com, the Everything app. And it's like, that's just not doing anything. All these tweets made by people who've paid for Twitter, huge numbers on them, million retweets, million likes, and it does nothing. And it's super interesting because it's like, there's this huge discussion years and years ago of like death of media, usually referring to, your conventional TV news, print publications, that kind of thing. And the implication in all those stories was like, oh, social media replaces it. I'm like, it kind of seems like it doesn't. Because, and this is like going hand in hand with all these stories of like, people are logging off. People are like not really on social media anymore. And the social media they do engage with is, I have a locked Instagram account for family and friends. Or I'm in a WhatsApp group chat. Or even when you're younger and like, less afraid of the consequences of, putting shit out there. Discord group. That's it. So it's like, yeah, I just found this really interesting thing where like this huge traditional and social media, like legacy and social media apparatus has been wielded against the candidate and it's doing nothing. If I didn't say it, predicting the future, I do think Catherine Connolly will win. So, yeah, this is Paternity Leave, Ciarán, signing off. Enjoy this episode that Nick did, and love yous.
Hey, welcome to your weekly corner Späti. It is myself, Nick, and I'm joined with Dave Braneck of, I guess you write sports for Deutsche Welle and Jacobin and whatnot. Thank you for coming onto the show. We are going to be talking about France, actually, not about sports. But yeah, thank you for coming on.
Very happy to be here. Thanks for having me.
And before we get into the, I want to have you on specifically because I assume that then a lot of our listeners are very much aware of the fact that there are the NFL Berlin games coming in the next few weeks. Our listeners who probably refer to all sport as sports ball. November 9th, Berlin is having a very bizarre event, which is correct me if I'm wrong, it is the Indianapolis Colts playing the Atlanta Falcons in Olympiastadion, all of which makes no sense to me.
Yeah, that's like a Mad Libs sports teams and stadium combination, kind of.
Yeah, but before we get into that, a sport that we're probably not going to be talking about much of at all is baseball. Have you seen that the MLB tried, I believe it is last year, to do what they have, because they've had the London games where they've tried to do it in, was it in like Wembley or whatever? I don't know.
I think so. Yeah. I think that was a couple years ago.
Yeah. Another like weird matchup too of like the Mets and like the Reds or something like that, if I'm not mistaken. The MLB tried to do the same thing in France.
Yeah.
And they wanted to do a Paris Games this year and could not find a single sponsor to do this in, which is the most French thing I've ever heard. Of not only in the sense of like, oh, okay, yeah, like, you know, the British, or like, I think you could do like a baseball Germany games thing. You know, I feel that the Germans are willing to like kind of like, you know, bend the knee to the US no matter what. And I guess we can talk about that later. But it is very funny in the sense that then it's like France is just like, fuck off. Like, don't even bother trying.
Not even trying it. Yeah, Germans love like stats and weird rules and stuff.
Germans,
so you could kind of really see it working outside of the kind of borderline imperial relations that still exist here. But France doesn't surprise me. They're not interested at all.
Absolutely not. Not even bothering to even. I find it the sense too, the reason it fell through is that not even like, you know, greedy French capital could bother with it. They're just like, don't even. We know that no one's going to come to this. The closest thing that the MLB had to any French influence was the Montreal Expos. Do not exist anymore. But yeah, I guess so. Moving on, like there's been an interesting shift, I would say, probably within like the last half decade or so. And you can correct me if I'm wrong, if it's been going on for longer. Of predominantly the NFL and the NBA. So for those who don't know, American football, the one where you get nonstop CTE,
Totally worth it.
Absolutely worth it. And basketball have kind of made their mark, or have been attempting to make their mark in Europe. And while the NBA with basketball, I think, is another interesting topic because basketball actually is popular here.
Yeah.
The NFL is not. And, well, you know, growing popularity.
Yeah.
So there's been then this, how did this all start, I guess? Like, where was then the point where then the NFL started, you know, oh, we're going to add a week to football and do a game in Europe?
Yeah. I mean, I think if you look at most of these sports that are doing it, and I would say ice hockey also does it as well, but it's maybe a little less noticeable because they're pretty targeted in that they aren't just trying to go for like London or big cities, but they're really focused on like Northern and Eastern Europe and countries that have sort of ice hockey culture. But I was actually a little bit surprised looking back that a lot of this has been going on since longer than I even remembered. I think like the NBA, they played their first regular season games abroad in 1990.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And back then they were focusing a lot on Japan, but in the last couple of years, it's been focusing more on Europe. Same thing where it's been roughly 10 years or so that the NHL and the NFL have been doing this. And the NFL really started focusing on London and have sort of spread out from there. And the NBA is now putting in a lot of effort, especially into France. But they're also, I think, you know, you can map a little bit onto everyone goes for London because it's a big city and there are lots of Americans there and stuff. But then I think they're relatively thoughtful about where does like basketball culture sort of exist. And same thing with the NFL. Germans are weirdly into football, or at least a large niche of them are weirdly into football, I think.
It is very, yeah, now that you mention it, I have seen a drastic increase of the amount of Germans just wearing NFL gear.
Yeah.
No teams, just the logo.
Rob Lowe style. I love the concept of this sport. And
I even remember seeing not too long ago, like a lookbook of what's that workwear company, Strauss, I believe it is?
The most popular clothing company in Germany, probably.
Yeah, probably them or Jack Wolfskin. Yeah. And they had a like NFL collab. And I was expecting, okay, I'm going to get like, you know, Strauss and like, I don't know, the San Francisco 49ers, you know, themed pants or something like that. No, everything was just the NFL logo and Strauss. No teams, no Denver Nugget jeans, nothing.
Yeah.
But there is something that then is like truly peculiar then of like the German sense of that. I think we can like kind of tap into that in a bit, but like kind of back to then the reason why then the NFL has like started with London is particularly then like, as you've like mentioned, of like a large expat community. Like that's probably like the easiest then to kind of like slide yourself into. But the UK is kind of like taken onto it quite well. The London games have been quite successful for the NFL. One of the most hilarious like facts about the London games is that it has created a larger fan base for the Jacksonville Jaguars in the UK than in the United States.
Yeah, pretty ridiculous. But yeah, I think that success has sort of pushed these leagues to think there's more potential. And I do think before NFL games were really coming in to Germany, you know, European football fans or American football fans would be going to London. And I kind of thought like the interest would wane a little bit, you know, because it's so normal. Now it like, does everyone in Europe have to go to the London game when, you know, there are multiple games every season and stuff like that, but it still seems quite popular. So it's a little hard to explain for me why exactly it's so popular, but it is working, I think.
Yeah, and now in the NFL too has then expanded the idea. We saw the first Munich games, was it last season or the season before? Or
I think the first Munich game was in 22 or 23, and then they played in Frankfurt, and then Munich again last season, and now they're coming to Berlin
then this season. And the Munich games ushered in one of the funniest photos to me ever was I forget who even played that game, but Minister President of Bavaria, Markus Söder, just getting selfies with these absolute giants of athletes and them having no idea who he is.
Random man in a suit who can't stop eating bratwurst.
Oh my God,
a photo.
No, he can't. Have you seen his, he did a cover of Sweet Caroline for Oktoberfest?
Oh, no. I think that could either be something that like finally brings joy into my life again or just
Don't
ends
watch
it for me.
No, yeah. I mean, it's because it's one of those things that then is so culturally like not German, but yet somehow has magically become a part of it.
Yeah.
I always associate that song as exclusively like Boston culture because for some reason the Red Sox have made that their thing. Everyone has made that their thing somehow across the world.
Yeah. Also, England, like their national soccer team and stuff. Everyone somehow claims it. Just let it be like a boring wedding song, you know? Why does it have to be applied to sports?
Well, then that makes it culturally very German then if it's very boring then.
That's true. That's true. It's pretty boring, and the rest of the world was doing it 10 years ago. So it's just entering Bavaria like a storm.
Absolutely. So with then the successes of the London game, we've seen the Germany game. These have I mean, like the Berlin game, if I'm not mistaken, like sold out like immediately.
Yeah,
it was, and the question that I guess that I have for a country like Germany then is who is this for? Where like the UK, it's like I think like, there's enough cultural similarity between the US and the UK that I can kind of like, all right, you know, like if I squint my eyes, you know, at the UK or the US long enough, it can become the other thing.
Yeah.
You know, where Germany is like, I get that there is like, you know, kind of like the cultural cuck nature of Germany to the United States. But Germany's very much stuck in their sports, I feel that then it's like, this is, you know, football, handball country, and the odd one out basketball.
Yeah.
Germany is very much has become a basketball country with like in the last decade. I mean, Dirk Nowitzki being like one of the superstars of like the 90s and 2000s.
Yeah.
Definitely allowed Germany to kind of have it like make its mark. There are, you know, Germany's national team in basketball is good.
Yeah.
You know,
they're really good. They're kind of reaping what that boom from Dirk sort of sowed years ago. Like now that next generation that sort of saw him start to play is coming up. So Germany weirdly is also a basketball country.
Yeah. But football is something that then now, while they are, you know, a large folk that could, you know, possibly be a good, you know, D-line in some, you know, time of in some near future, It seems very difficult for the sport to kind of catch on. One, the games are at like 2:00 in the morning.
Yeah.
You know, even I have tried to watch the Super Bowl here in Germany and I can't do it. I get to the halftime show, it's 4 in the morning and I'm like, all right, like I don't care who wins at this point. I'm out. I care about football probably the least of all American sports, but nonetheless, I try to at least like, watch it here or there.
Yeah.
There was a European NFL that like failed years ago, but these aren't like remnant fans of that in some regard, are they?
No, I mean, I think there's probably a fair amount of crossover, and I think that's probably a bit of a challenge for these because there's still a German football league, and they 2 or 3 years ago relaunched out of the ashes of NFL Europe, the European League of Football. And I think there are 16 teams and 7 of them are based in Germany. So Germany is probably the most football-pilled European country.
But who comes to play then in the German league? Is it Germans or is it like because contracts for some professional sports here are actually not bad.
Yeah.
In the sense of basketball is a really good example for Germany. If you don't make it in the NBA, you can have actually a pretty decent career playing for someone like Alba or Bayern München or whatever. Is that who's coming to play in the European NFL? Because that's what it used to be. I mean, there's even former NFL stars ending their career in the 2000s in, whatever these teams were called. I have no idea. I can't even remember a single one.
Yeah, the Berlin Rebels or whatever, or that's one of the current teams, and the Potsdam Royals. Pretty good stuff. I think it's kind of a mix. I think this time actually the league is pretty cognizant of the fact that like they want to sort of grow European football culture, which I have no idea how realistic that is, but I think there are now kind of like limits on the number of foreign players you can bring in, so it's not 100% Americans who didn't make it into the NFL, the CFL or whatever.
I played in the Bundesliga for baseball here.
Oh yeah.
So you're only allowed to have like 3 foreign players on the field.
And you were one of them?
No, I was not because I was European. If you're European, you don't count.
Those filthy loopholes.
Which then you can do
taking away jobs from our European baseballers.
Absolutely. If you have a European passport, you can do the loophole and become a Baseball Deutsche. It's called, which is
playing for the national team.
No. You can't play for the national team, but you can then be on the field as an EU citizen, a non-foreign EU citizen. So, and there's positions that you weren't allowed to play as a foreigner. You cannot play shortstop.
That is very specific.
Well, because probably your shortstop is probably the best person on the team.
Yeah,
and probably from the U.S.
Yeah,
or like the Dominican Republic.
No bringing in ringers.
What they would do though is that they would bring a lot of like people from like Cuba and Dominican Republic and this and that, and then like teams would sponsor their citizenships so they could become German and play baseball. So a lot of like the Dominican dudes that I played baseball with were actually German. And so they, that other loophole.
Sports diplomacy at its best.
Yeah. The funniest thing of this too is that this was for the second Bundesliga, which no one watches.
Yeah.
No one watches the first Bundesliga for baseball anyway. But
where would you actually play?
Yeah, here.
But where's the ground or the
it was all the way out in Neukölln. Okay. There's also one because we're in Wedding right now. There's also one that then's up further north near like Wittenau. There's like a really nice baseball field up there. But it is very funny. It like started as a thing. It was like, I found a baseball team. And they were like, do you want to play on our Bundesliga team? And I'm like, this is too funny. I stopped playing baseball in high school.
Yeah, so that's pretty much the level, basically.
It is worse.
Okay.
It is so bad.
Oh, God. All right. Yeah, they got a while to go with baseball, I guess.
Oh, no. It's never going to catch on, which kind of for the funny reasons of it's the one sport that Germans would like.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, I think baseball also a tough sell. I'm slightly surprised even that the London games for baseball would be remotely effective just because you have a way more popular 1-to-1 equivalent in cricket where it's like no one has space in their hearts for 2 really complex bat-based games. So you would think it'd be a little harder to squeeze in, but
and that's kind of the thing too, that then I guess it's like maybe then to exactly that point that maybe the NFL is then appealing to certain Germans because it is incredibly foreign.
Yeah.
You know, like there is the sense of like to the sense of I don't think that baseball could catch on in the UK for exactly the same reason why cricket won't do it in the US. Why bother?
Yeah.
You know, I've explained, you know, baseball to enough Europeans and they don't understand it. You know, I can't imagine, like, even if I've tried to understand cricket as someone who's a huge baseball fan, and I'm like, all right, like, I'm not going to bother with this.
Yeah.
But where football is in itself kind of like, yeah, you can make the argument. It's like, oh, well, there's a bit that's similar to rugby and there's a bit that's similar to, you know, I guess Australian rules or
Gaelic
football, but those aren't a thing here.
Yeah.
Or then Germans could probably, or like someone who has never really seen something like that could probably be like easily drawn to it. And it is like, I mean, although I said that it's the sport that I care about the least, it is like, you know, probably one of the easiest to get into in the sense of just like how the game is played. You know, there is like, there ain't like big dudes bashing each other's heads in.
Yeah.
And there seems to be like a lot of excitement and done in these like short bursts. I get it. Maybe. I don't know.
Yeah. I think it's the type of game that you can like immediately see its appeal and then spend a long time really getting into the nuances of, which is both good for like drawing in newcomers and then giving them a reason to stay. I think sort of there's a bit of a mix where they're obviously hoping to get expats that are living in Munich or in Berlin to come and just want a taste of that, you know, sweet apple pie of American culture.
Aren't they aware that the expat that then is in Berlin is probably the most unlikely NFL fan?
Running away from it. Yeah. NFL fans bullied us. We don't want to come to that game and get reminded of our high school experiences. There's that. And then I think there is a pretty big segment of German sports fans, I think also in part because like, you know, a lot of fans are just soccer fans already, but they have room for kind of secondary sports. And because the time is different and the league schedule is really different, they're not necessarily competing. And I think of both like NBA and NFL. There's a type of German dude in his like 30s with like a beard and like a flat brimmed hat with like an American sports logo on it. You can like automatically generate which team or league it is that loves Deutschrap and like maybe Kendrick or something.
His favorite rapper is Eminem, first off. Like he has to let you know that he's like, best rapper is Eminem. But he does like Kendrick because Kendrick is like, he's, you know, lyrical.
He's lyrical. And then like outside of that, it's all like boom bap stuff and like Deutschrap basically, who like love American sports. And like these things are kind of tied together. You like parts of American culture and American sports, and like you've been wearing cargo shorts since long before they came back.
This is the kind of person that then 10 years ago, the only business they knew how to open up were burger places.
Yes. Yeah. They kept the various punny burger named restaurants in Berlin going for a decade, basically.
Yeah. Always play. You go into the place, they were always playing Notorious B.I.G. or something in that story. Yeah. There was this person is evergreen in Germany. You're absolutely right. And the funniest thing I've seen is one of these guys. He's a random German guy from obviously here who is just this, and you're right. They pick a random team and they stick with it.
Yeah.
And you know what? I appreciate it because Germans like don't have, I don't know what it is, but they really, when it's like they pick a team, they really just kind of like throw a dart at a map of the U.S. and pick a team. It's not like, oh, you know, I mean, there are a lot of Lakers fans because of like Dennis Schroeder or whatever, but you know, I like the Heat, or like whichever team is like doing really well. They'll be like, oh, you know, this one guy who I keep getting on my feed on Instagram is an Arizona Cardinals fan.
Oh, okay.
And I just don't know how this happened, which then as someone from Arizona, I would never pick any Arizona sports team. Maybe the Suns, depending on what it is. But the fact that you picked the worst team in our state, salute to you, whatever Felix or Jan or whatever your name is. And he keeps trying to like get players from the Cardinals to like drink a beer with him.
Is that remotely effective? How
I don't think that it is at all.
Probably not.
But he has like his whole German man cave that he has, completely decked out with Arizona Cardinal stuff. He is in it he is probably more dedicated than any Cardinals fan in the United States. But exactly, beard, flat brim hat.
Yep.
Probably everything else that you've mentioned of him is 100% correct.
Yeah. Big man Jens, loving the Cardinals. I mean, it is also, it's weird because I'm very much, especially because I'm a big soccer fan, and I kind of think like the whole point of sports is like the in-stadium fan experience, and people who just watch on TV aren't real fans, but there is an insane level of dedication required to wake up at ungodly hours to watch your team lose, you know?
Yeah.
So I can respect it, and to some degree I would watch a lot of European soccer from the US, or now I still will wake up to watch my American teams and stuff. So I kind of get it, but it's still weird. And what I really don't quite understand is it is truly, if you pick your random team or whatever, but you just like the sport so much that you don't like the Colts or the Hawks, but you're still going to go to the game in Berlin just because it's two NFL teams and you can see it live and stuff.
And you're going to go with your generic NFL gear.
Yeah, you're going to go with your generic stuff.
I hope both teams have fun.
Yeah, like as inoffensive as possible, because a similar thing happens in the US where all these really big, European soccer teams always do their preseason tours in the US. And I think at first, 15 years ago when they started doing it, it was like, oh, I like Manchester United, but Barcelona's here, I'll still see them. And then I think there were kind of diminishing returns, and it's like people will see the team they like, but they're not going to just fill a 70,000 seat NFL stadium to watch some random European team. And so the question is sort of, when does the novelty run out? Will there be diminishing returns? But I think the big difference is their regular season games, which I actually think is really fucked up.
Yeah. The fact that that's one thing that then I found also then I guess for the NFL it matters maybe a little bit less because you have things like bye weeks. You play once a week, whatever but then I don't know, the athletes do come here like the days before they have the massive press kind of rigmarole that they all do where they're like, oh, hey, try German food.
Yeah.
And, being like nonstop cameras in front of them, the NFL having their whole thing of, they have the, I would assume that there's some fan experience day thing or something like that the day before or something like that, as would be I don't know, before the only one I can think of that I've been to is when the All-Star game was in Phoenix for the MLB, and there's an entire week of activities and whatnot. They probably they surely do something similar to that here. So for the athletes, it's exhausting in the sense of time change. You're then doing all this other extra press shit, and then on top of it, you have to go play a game on Sunday that actually does count for you.
Yeah. It probably is an odd mix of, it feels a little bit like an exciting off-season vacation field trip type thing, but the game still matters. But I also think, I think it's from a fan perspective, pretty unacceptable in any case to, you lose a home game so that your team can maybe sell some jerseys in Europe. But, if it's the NHL or the NBA, when you're playing 82 games a season, and you have 41 home games, that's a little bit different than the NFL when there are so few games in a season. That's actually something pretty big to give up. But fans in the US, are used to just being considered customers and not really being bothered by things. There doesn't seem to be too much pushback. I don't know.
Well, yeah, that's kind of then a thing I wanted to ask as well, is that then, because when I asked the general question, who is this for? Obviously, it's for the owners in the league and this and that and that. I think it's very clear in the sense that they're aware that there's a money grab to be done here. But who fronts the bill for these games? Because there's been the example of one country that's actually had quite a lot of backlash from the NFL, and weirdly the NCAA doing games here, which makes no sense to me, has been Ireland.
Yeah.
There's been lots of protests. Ciarán was telling me that then just when I mentioned that we were doing this episode, he was like, oh yeah, the Irish government had to put forth 10 million euros simply just to do this game with no profit sharing thing done from the NFL. NFL keeping all the ticket money, everything of that sort.
Yeah.
Having then the state provide these, the opportunity for them to do it. And then kind of do like the American thing of like, well, it's going to bring in tourism for you.
Some people will stay at some hotels, therefore it's worth.
Yeah, Dublin, a place that then has no tourism. Ever.
It's not overran by tourists and already American tourists.
Yeah, exactly.
Throwing up Guinness and saying, "I'm also Irish because my great 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 grandfather was here once."
Oh my God! Can you wait? Didn't Notre Dame play there very recently?
They have.
That must have been the worst
season
weekend.
Or two ago. It must genuinely have been one of the worst places to be in the world while that was happening. But I mean, hey, look, I love tradition in sports, so I can't knock the Aer Lingus like college football classic, which has been going on since 2016. And they've been playing games in Ireland for decades, actually, which is weird. College football makes even less sense to me to play abroad.
Yeah, how do you market that to people? Like, hey, here's all these, students. They don't get paid.
Yeah.
I mean, until now, but
yeah, true.
They are here strictly for your gladiatorial entertainment, more or less.
Yeah. I mean, people show up to it. I do think it's
one guy's going to be a lawyer in the future and the other guy's going to be a Pro Bowler.
Pretty much. That's going to be the mix there. I mean, I think it's been something that's happening for a while in Ireland. To my knowledge, the protests only really sort of started this season. I'm not even sure about last season. And yes, there was some pushback towards spending tax money or, Irish taxpayers' money on accommodating the NFL. But I think also a lot of it was surrounded around like the NFL's, American football, particularly its ties to sort of American militarism, the U.S.'s role in Gaza. So I think there were kind of two levels of frustration there. One was like, do we want to support this thing where there's going to be a massive American flag waving in Dublin? And do we want to foot the bill for it? But yeah, they're almost always paid for by the taxpayer. Same thing in Berlin. So the city of Berlin is going to spend 12.5 million euros on renovating the Olympiastadion. So that, especially, I think they've got to change a little bit on the field, but I think most of what they're doing is in the locker rooms and showers and stuff because, soccer, there aren't 200 players when soccer teams get together, where it's like, well, when are you ever going to use this besides in 8 years from now when the NFL comes back again? And they argue that, yes, there'll be enough tourism, there'll be a big enough bump, people will be spending enough money that'll be worth it. And I think they allocated maybe $200,000 towards supporting like Berlin school level flag football to grow their game in the long term.
Done at like the American schools.
I'm sure it's only happening in like Zehlendorf or whatever.
100%, exactly.
So there is something that I think it's almost, again, a little surprising that there only really seems to be pushback in Ireland around this, at least from what I've seen, or any form of sort of major pushback. But I also think it's tied to the fact that, the last 20 years, you've seen sort of an encroachment in all sports, way more so in the US, but also in Europe, where the assumption is the taxpayers will foot the bill for a new stadium, will foot the bill for throwing a tournament. And the benefits will be vaguely diffuse, but it'll be good for a city or good for a country, and bring in tourism or help support, the revitalization of a neighborhood or whatever. But if you actually look at where the profits directly go, they're in the pockets of the owners.
Is there maybe also something of the fact too that these Berlin games or the Germany NFL games for the average person have kind of like just slipped under the radar? I feel that then if I was not from the US and knew that the NFL does this thing and like knew that what American football was, I feel that I could kind of go about my life not knowing that this event it's not like the Olympics or whatever, because like the Olympics in Berlin that they're proposing, and I know that then it's like Berlin has put in like 4 dates or whatever possibly that you have to do. Obviously the most controversial being 2036. They've kind of backed up. They've realized it was a bad idea. They initially wanted to co-host with Tel Aviv for a little while. This was before October 7th. They'd still do it.
Kai Wegner would do it tomorrow if he could. But yeah, I mean, it is true. It's a much smaller scale where I think also it's impressive that these large stadiums sell out, and we kind of scratch our heads and think, who is this for a little bit? Where are these people coming from? But in cities with, a couple million inhabitants, it's a drop in the bucket, and the average person is maybe only vaguely aware of it, or they see on the Berliner Fenster when they're on the U-Bahn the day before the game. Oh yeah, that NFL game is happening. The most
like clunky explanation of how the sport works. Yeah.
So I think it's true. Maybe people are not particularly aware of it, and certainly not aware that the city is spending 12 million on renovating the Olympiastadion for it. So I think it goes under the radar a little bit, and in that sense can avoid criticism. Maybe it'll heat up a little bit as we get closer, but I think also it just costs so much to do anything. We're so used to sporting events costing so much that I think people also just sort of shrug and say, well, you want to throw one game, then that's going to cost 10 million.
Yeah. And I think because in at least Germany and Berlin, we recently had the Euro Cup was here.
Mm-hmm.
Last year. And those are events that Germany doesn't mind. Germans don't mind happening either, because it's the sense of everyone loves football here. That's not a problem. Champions League happens in Berlin quite frequently.
Yeah.
It is possibly one of the benefits of that being that the Olympiastadion is so far out that then it's like kind of like people, the traffic of all those fans are going to be in this one area for one evening, and then they kind of clear out the next day, where it could be the sense of the NFL stuff is possibly going to function the exact same way. There is this like out of sight, out of mind sort of thing of Olympiastadion that I feel other stadiums maybe in Germany don't have as much. I know that then in the sense of like, most stadiums are located within the city themselves.
Usually,
like Allianz Arena is like in like Munich proper. It's not like, for those who don't know the geography of Berlin, Olympiastadion is like far out, still in Berlin, but like is like the end of like an U-Bahn line almost.
It's pretty far out in West Berlin. I think the thing is also it's both the location of the stadium, but it's Berlin's spread out geography as well, where like, even if say you go to a game in Frankfurt and the stadium's a little ways outside, just on the edge of the city or whatever, there's a fairly natural place in the middle of the city where fans congregate. Yeah. Whereas in Berlin, it's usually, they'll be relatively close to Bahnhof Zoo at the like big church, but some fans will meet elsewhere and stuff like that. And so unless you happen to be in Charlottenburg at this one really specific place, it doesn't have the feeling that most other cities have that aren't quite so spread out, of this feeling of our city's been taken over by fans in the days preceding a game, in the night of the game and stuff. So it is, I think, a lot easier to miss. I think when it's soccer, because Germans love soccer, they kind of get swept up in it. And I can imagine this being a kind of odd curiosity that also people are intrigued by, if they even are aware of it. So many Berliners just don't even clock this stuff going on, I feel like. Yeah,
no, for sure. Like the vastness of the city definitely like has you forget that there are like, there have been years here where I have watched the Champions League final, did not know it was in the city. Yeah. And then was like hours afterwards wondering like, oh yeah, there are a lot of like Real Madrid fans around.
I just noticed all these Barcelona shirts or whatever.
Like, makes sense now.
Yeah.
But I guess in the sense of it with the NFL's you mentioned something too about like the militarism of the United States as well, and I think that this has to kind of go, or like we can just kind of like the general like overarching theme of like American imperialism is that then we kind of can't not acknowledge the fact of just like the pure soft power that this thing is as well too. Yeah. And it's kind of interesting that then a game like a sport that then is possibly the most like the sport most associated with American militarism, football, is the one that then is trying to like make its footing in a continent that then is like maybe not on the best of terms with it. Yeah. At the moment, where it's like, yeah, fine, squint your eyes at the UK, it can become the US if you try, but this has its limitations, kind of just between, at least it seems like, these two countries.
Yeah, I think it's an interesting time though if I compare the moment we're in with kind of, or even like the first Trump term, where there's obviously international criticism and disdain towards Trump in the US. Maybe it's more tired and accepting now than it was in his first term. But it lacks this sort of Bush era, okay, we're also rejecting American cultural imperialism. We're going to turn our nose at dumb American culture as Europeans. I feel like now people are a lot more likely to kind of silo things and still love American TV or still love American music or still love the NFL.
He loves Kendrick.
We love Kendrick. We know 2 of his songs, and we're a little too nervous to try and sing along, but we do really like it. But there's, I feel like, less of this kind of cultural element of we see ourselves at odds with the US and rejecting American culture, which maybe makes it easier to accept something that is pretty brazenly connected both to American militarism, both to kind of racial strife in the US. I mean, like the Jenses and Jurgens that wear those flat-brimmed caps probably are familiar with the story of Colin Kaepernick, but they maybe don't really care or can isolate these things a little bit. And it's in I think even more so than in Trump's first term, we've seen Trump really do a solid job of like using his base and his connections to sports in order to, better himself both in the election and now since then. And that also draws less criticism than you might think. People don't connect him.
Yeah, I mean, there is, especially that, Trump he himself invested in MMA alternatives to UFC and stuff like that. He's very good friends with tons of people weirdly in fighting.
Yeah, Dana
sports,
White,
which
and Vince
perfectly
McMahon.
makes sense for him being the queeniest president of all time. But yeah, there is it will be interesting to see that then, in the sense of one, the NFL kind of looking back at this maybe in the next few years, wondering how much the Germany stuff is going to pay off. There is, I do find it very interesting that there's advertisements all the time now for the Man channel, what is it, RAN or whatever.
Yeah.
That's we have every NFL, not every NFL game, but a lot of NFL games.
Yeah.
And it's you can if you get the manly version of ProSieben, you can watch all your favorite, Atlanta Falcons games or whatever it is or something. I mean, I guess they could also theoretically get the NFL package thing or whatever.
Yeah.
But there is this targeted marketing to the Jens and Jurgens of Germany of oh, well, don't you want to watch this at 3 a.m.? We have a package for you that you can buy. And you get I remember last Super Bowl, there were advertisements all throughout the city, hilariously with generic NFL looking football players, and then just no logos or nothing. And then it was who played the Eagles and the Chiefs or whatever. And it was just, it looked like, the most shit knockoff
stock photos.
Yeah, stock photos of any sport, and it was for the Man channel. Watch the Super Bowl.
I mean, I think the Man channel, besides being an important step in reaffirming your manliness,
absolutely. Germany's Spike TV.
Germany's Spike TV, again, just catching on now, right in time, right in that zeitgeist. But I think that's also an important element where, yes, it's about filling Olympiastadion once a season or whatever, but it's also about building interest in the sport, which in turn, they see Germany as a large market, or in Europe more broadly as a market for streaming, which has become increasingly more important in how they sort of build their business profile. So I think actually as cheesy or embarrassing the streaming sites might market themselves as being, that's kind of actually what this is about. Your ability to, within the last 10 to 15 years, leagues have gone from basically, offering free streaming rights or experimenting with just, hey, people need to be kind of exposed to this sport, to, okay, now we can really start to charge them and try and kind of push bidding wars among streamers versus Sky and more traditional TV and stuff. So I think that's where long-term they think there's a bit of a future. And I think that's also, most of these leagues, that's just kind of their business plan more generally. They realize, yes, in the US especially, you can charge people disgusting amounts of money.
Oh yeah,
to go to
everyone
games.
will have like they will have every streaming service you can possibly think of.
Yeah, but you need 5 streaming services that you're paying $25 a month a pop for to see all of your team's games. And I think they've also clocked a little bit that, like, you know, as popular as Netflix or Amazon or whatever it might be, live sports, the live element of it can't really be competed with. And so even, you know, in places with horrible time differences, they're realizing, okay, we could leverage this a bit. So I think that's the long-term plan.
Yeah. Now transitioning then over for like maybe the last half of this episode to like an example of them where this has actually been quite successful, and maybe possibly if we have time to an example that then has been, you know, I mentioned earlier the MLB that has been horribly unsuccessful within Europe, that they cannot do it no matter how hard they try. The NBA has been good about this actually.
Yeah.
And it kind of like, it is something that then has, it's something that I forget all the time that is also incredibly popular here, depending on which part of Europe you are in.
Yeah.
Germany now is like a new basketball country. The Balkans have been basketball land for decades now. Yeah. And there is like, I've been seeing there, you know, there's been this shift now of the NBA kind of doing the similar thing of like, oh, like, you know, I mentioned like what the Orlando Magic are going to be playing like 4 games in Berlin or something like that or whatever.
I'm not sure how many games they're playing. I know they're playing the Grizzly. I don't know how many games they'll
But it's
have
like,
yet.
it's a few games. So
Yeah.
they're like, and first off, why of all teams, the Orlando Magic? And does the NBA even actually need to do something like this in order to, because then this is then the question of is it really spreading the popularity of the sport? I don't think you don't need to try with basketball in Europe. It's here.
Yeah. I think there are probably 2 elements to it. I think one is, you know, hashtag growth mindset. So like this idea that something's already popular, why would we like spend a lot of time and energy and money in order to grow it? 0.01% doesn't register to anyone in the US because if you can grow, you have to, and you have to defend the market share you have. I think another element is like trying to ensure that as domestic basketball grows in popularity, that the NBA still is seen as the number one thing you have to watch. And even if you're an Alba fan or whatever, you still have to also watch the NBA. That's where it really matters. And I actually think, yes, it's incredibly arbitrary that it's the Magic, but I do think it kind of makes sense, sort of like you were talking about with the Jaguars in London. If you have one team say, this is kind of our foreign market, and build up a bit of a fan base, that to me makes a little more sense than every year it's 2 totally random teams. Yeah. There's no continuity or whatever. Why would it be the Magic?
Yeah, the Magic have one of the Wagner brothers.
Yeah.
Which I guess for Germany doesn't make sense.
Makes it then an easier or bigger sell until he's traded against his will. And then it no longer makes any sense whatsoever.
Yeah. And all the poor German fans with their, you know, Wagner jerseys are just going to be lost.
Yeah, they're going to burn them in protest. So, I mean, again, I find it a bit bizarre and a middle finger to actual, you know, I don't think I ever thought in my life I've had anything close to like understanding or pity for a Florida sports fan, but I do feel for these Magic, you know, it's an actual home game. That shit should matter. Yeah. You should care about that. That's a home field advantage that's taken away from you. Yeah. People should care about that.
Hey, but you know what? Berliners will show up for... Actually, you know what would be really funny is if that crowd was louder than any, which could possibly be the case.
Very possible.
Because who the fuck is an Orlando Magic?
I mean, it's pretty possible
in the United States.
Yeah,
but the thing that then I just find so peculiar about it is like, yeah, to what you mentioned of the sense of, you know, the U.S. mindset is growth no matter what. If I can make 0.0001% more growth on this, I'll do this.
Yeah,
and then there's been this weird discussion of this like possible like Super League thing happening with basketball, which that's stupid. I can't, like, I know that then that these owners want money that is it. And I think the thing that then to think about more so than anything whenever we're talking about with U.S., particularly U.S. sports, but Europe is of course not, they're not, free of this criticism, is like the value of American teams is significantly more than most. I mean, except for maybe like the handful of like Barcelona's and Real Madrid and like Bayern München. Like the Dallas Cowboys and like the New York Yankees and the Dodgers are like the most valued sports franchises in the world by a long shot.
Yeah. Which I think also is tied to why we've seen a raft of initially sort of usually doofus American billionaires and now like weird like amalgamations of like three faceless white guys in a trench coat that's just some like private equity firm buying all these European soccer teams because they actually do think they're incredibly undervalued and underleveraged. Yeah. But I think also there's a structural difference there. So any European sports team or depending on the exact league, but 90% of European sports teams can get relegated and sent down to the second league. You're not locked into the first league. You're not protected in the way you are in the franchise system of the US, where if you're bad in Europe, you're punished for it. In the US, if you're bad, you're handed a draft pick. So I think the structural differences have really large economic ramifications, but also sort of shape these totally different sporting cultures, which I also think sometimes is part of the appeal for the Europeans. These filthy European socialists are intrigued by a European sporting or an American sporting context where we share our profits. And the worst of us are lifted up by drafting a quarterback who hopefully won't get a DUI. So I think there, these interesting kind of economic and cultural differences that make the other side intriguing to the other and open for investment on the side.
So that's definitely then like the attitude that then I have towards whenever I explain to Americans like, no, the structure of European leagues makes a million times more sense. It is more competitive because if you fuck up and you're out of the league, where, you can have like a, 76ers thing where my goal is to bomb so hard that I'm going to rebuild my team by bombing.
Trust the process, baby. Fans love 8 years of tanking and then getting nothing for it in return.
And that attitude has, because that's the thing too, is that it like, if you want to see like the purest version of neoliberalization of sports, you can look at you can specifically just only look at one team, which is the Tampa Bay Rays in the United States, where there's no emotion to anything of how the team is constructed. Everything is statistics, and they suck and they're boring and no one likes them.
Yeah, we're doing Billy Bean, but really bad.
Yeah, really bad and the most so boring that the MLB has had to change rules because of things that we have done purely out of statistical nonsense. And you can, are the Rays a good team? Yeah, depending on which year it is. They'll make. Will they ever probably win a World Series? I don't know. Eventually, but if they have not won a World Series now with then their method of how they play, then it's kind of the sense that you would at least assume that then other teams would be like, well, we're not going to do that anymore. Where then actually the reality of it is like now every team has a hyper analytics department of just like, well, we're going to do the Rays with more money and better analytics. The Dodgers are a great example of that. If they have the best analytics in baseball, they have also the most money in baseball. They won the World Series last year. They're also doing, quite well this season as well in the NLCS currently. That's kind of catching on into Europe. Like it is, we're getting the statistics more so. Football being the largest sport here, the neoliberalization of it, as you've mentioned too, ownership coming from American, Fenway.
Fenway Sports Group owning Liverpool.
Owning Liverpool being one of the best examples of that, of the Red Sox being the team that then tried to hire Billy Bean in the 2000s.
I believe so, but I'm not a baseball nut, so I can't.
Yeah. Anyway, they tried to hire the Moneyball guy, didn't get him, ended up getting a somehow better Moneyball guy, Moneyball their way into the World Series, ended up becoming the most dominant franchise in the 2010s. Form this holding group and have been trying to do the same thing within European soccer. Now they own Liverpool, and Liverpool also probably being notoriously now one of the most like stats driven teams within the Premier League.
Yeah. Well, this I absolutely should know. I thought Fenway Sports Group had sold Liverpool a couple years ago, but doesn't matter.
Well, I mean, they could have sold it, but I'm just saying in the sense too of the transformation of that club into then being what they are now of today.
Yes,
is like wholeheartedly on, you know, the back of that. Then an American analytics-driven, neoliberalized machine of sports purchased them and tried to do and successfully did the thing that they have done with sports in the United States.
Yeah, and I mean, I think there you've seen mixed results, but I think it's either 9 or maybe even it's actually 10 now of the 20 teams in the Premier League are owned by Americans. Almost half of Serie A in Italy is owned by Americans. And you have seen like the massive explosion of analytics and data into soccer. I think it's not as easy as in other sports. So you've kind of seen some mixed results there. I also think maybe for some of our flat-brimmed German friends, that's part of the appeal of some of these American sports games. You know, they're very data-heavy. You can understand the numbers. If you're good enough at Excel, you will win your fantasy football league for the week, which is slightly harder to apply to soccer. They've done it, and it's made the game in a lot of ways more boring. You know, like a dude like Maradona who like at times had a beer belly and was 3.5 feet tall and would like waddle around, but when he felt like it, do the most beautiful and amazing things you could imagine. You know, they've been kind of squeezed out of the sport to make way for this kind of, we're really worried about like the number of expected goals we can score and stuff like that. So you've seen this also not only in ownership, but in sort of analyzing the game and sort of how you approach coaching, building up your backroom staff. There's also been a kind of creeping Americanization there as well.
And so to slightly kind of like we went from talking about basketball now to soccer, kind of going then back to then where I mean, like there is then kind of this there's something I think that's fundamentally interesting with soccer or football is that then the inverse of this has actually like kind of like had its limit. The Americans are into soccer. That's not to say that they aren't. I think when people are like, oh, they're like, the problem of the US is that they can't like somehow make a good national team, which I never understand with how popular the sport is actually there. Yeah. But the inability then of the MLS to become like a competitive league is actually like incredibly down to the fact of how this monopolized league system works. It has become a thing of just like a retiree league. I think, you know, like Messi plays now in Miami. Thomas Müller just recently transferred to like some Canadian team or something. He
always dreamed, since he was a little boy, he dreamed of playing for the then non-existent Vancouver Whitecaps.
Yeah, that's who it was. The Vancouver what, Wildcats?
Whitecaps.
Whitecaps. Right. See, I don't fucking know even the name of the MLS teams.
Yeah.
But yeah, like this is kind of the thing. You go there, you know, you didn't Marco Reus also go to play with an American team now too?
Yeah, he played in Los Angeles.
Oh yeah, for the Galaxy. Yeah, true. Or did he play for FC or
it was the Galaxy?
Okay, yeah, because they have now a new team, newer
team. It's also I think both part of aging and not being in the US, but I'm always like, yeah, there's that second team in LA, that new team LAFC, and then I'm like, oh, they were founded like 5 years ago. Where has my life gone? But yeah, there's a second newer team in LA that also spends big. I mean, I think MLS is interesting in that it's been a borderline retiree league for a long time. Like I'm from New Jersey. I like fell in love with the sport in New Jersey, and when I was a fan of the team, Ciarán was playing in New York, you know, and it was always, you flipped a coin. These retirees either looked at this as like a paid vacation and like you could see them week to week, like put on pounds and stuff, or they gave a shit. And Ciarán, even when his like knees didn't work, if he kind of cared, he was still way better than anybody else and really fun to watch. But I think MLS is an interesting case in that attendance is actually pretty solid. It's grown a lot. And I think because that's another thing that's been seen as sort of under leveraged, like teams now have to pay 300 to 400 million to buy a club in expansion fees. That's what Newcastle cost. Like it doesn't really line up with what buying a franchise in the US costs versus what buying an established European team costs. But I think the league has gotten pretty greedy and expanded incredibly quickly. So for every Messi, you have to fill out a roster. And if they had the same player pool with, 18 teams or whatever, instead of the roughly 30 teams they have now, the overall level of play would probably be a lot higher.
Yeah.
So it's an interesting league. And I think probably part of the problem is that from a fan's perspective, when I started going, it was really cool because like I was a teenager, I could afford going. We had a really like working class fan base. Like half of our songs were in Spanish because there were so many Uruguayan and Argentinian fans and stuff. I think now Americans view success as how much can you charge someone to go to a game?
Yeah.
And Messi has just totally destroyed that. So the league, I think, will keep growing, but that'll just kind of dick over average fans. And I think the World Cup coming to the US, Canada, and Mexico will just be the next step.
Is it really going to be in those other two countries, though? Like,
I'm hoping it's only in those two countries. Yeah. Take the US out of it, strip them of it.
Yeah, as they should. But I mean, there is the thing too of that. Soccer definitely has gathered, whether in the sense if the league itself can grow or not. I know like there are far more casual soccer fans now in the US than there was like when I left the US. Like the idea like being into soccer was seen as like an annoying, like just like at least like the part of the country I'm from, there is no MLS team in Arizona.
Yeah.
There's like a second league that doesn't actually exist as a second league because there's no relegation.
Very confusing.
But yes, a championship league team in Phoenix. But yeah, like that, like if you were into soccer, you were annoying. No,
I mean, people consider me annoying for a lot of reasons, but my enjoyment of soccer was definitely part of that in my youth. And I think that's kind of similar, or the, mirror of what we're talking about versus, okay, 75,000 people are going to see the Colts play in Berlin, and 4,000 people every week go to see the European League of Football team play in Berlin. And so there's always going to be that gap. And I think that's the challenge for MLS or these, European basketball and football leagues. How do you take a general growing interest and popularity of a sport and translate that into people actually showing up for what is obviously not going to be as high of a quality product as it is when you can just turn on your TV and watch Barcelona or watch Bayern or whatever.
Yeah.
So I think soccer has exploded. And I think the problem is, how do you does the league take advantage of that? But yeah, I think the World Cup will be interesting. I think if the ticket prices were normal,
they won't be. No, of course
they're not going to be normal. They're going to be a genuine travesty to the people's game. But if they were normal, I think it would be an amazing thing for growth of the sport in the US. So I'm curious to see what'll kind of come in the wake of the tournament. But like international football is really popular. A lot of people will watch the Champions League. The Mexican national soccer team is the most popular soccer team in the U.S. So the U.S. diversity plays a big role in the kind of inherent popularity of the sport. But where exactly that's going and whether or not that means, Sporting Kansas City will always sell out its stadium. They actually get pretty decent credit. But, like what that really means for the future of domestic soccer in the U.S., kind of an open question.
Yeah, I've been seeing that then like hilariously teams like the Portland Timbers have like a very large and vocal fan base. So does it what is Atlanta's team called? I think it may just be Atlanta FC actually.
Atlanta United,
that's it. Yeah,
as lame as the Vancouver Whitecaps are because of all the waves crashing around in Vancouver, I will take a cheesy American name any day over United. There were no teams that united to become Atlanta, or all these FCs or whatever. They're so soulless. So I kind of admire and enjoy the cheese of the American names.
But on one last kind of like observation of it, of all this is that kind of like, and this is my very unprofessional observation of there seems to be a thing that then these American sports are okay with then doing this, soft power U.S. imperialism thing, as long as the U.S. can like still be the best at the sport. And there is kind of the thing too that the Americans talk down to soccer or football because they suck.
Yeah.
Like on a national team level thing. And there is kind of this thing too of like, okay, the NFL, it can spread as much as it's going to in Europe. There's never going to really be like an international competition of American football. The U.S. is, if you are even into the sense of that, then we do see a bit of international players in the NFL, which is quite rare.
Yeah.
It's a mix of two things. Americans born on an army base somewhere, like
the Germanicans playing in the NFL.
What are their two names? The brothers.
Forget. But Americans born abroad on an army base,
or you have then the sense of a guy who played in Australian rules or a Gaelic football or something and could kick the ball really well.
Yeah,
and or were a soccer player and can become a kicker or punter. The sense of like the international athlete in the NFL does not really quite exist the same way that it does in literally any other sport.
Yeah.
Even golf has more international
that's
athletes.
True. I think that's a unique element of the NFL that, you don't see it all in the NBA, and like Olympic basketball has gotten way better
gotten a lot,
now that it's competitive.
There even is the sense too that I think that within maybe not the next Olympics, but within like an Olympics within our lifetime, the United States is not going to be taking home gold. I think that also was that, I think, was it the quote from Dennis Schröder during these last Olympics where then Kevin Durant got in like a Twitter fight with him of, him like Dennis Schröder being like, European basketball is like competitive and it's like worth something, and there's a lot that it has to offer. As someone who came up in both leagues, he's very much aware of that.
Yeah.
And as, being at like, I'd go into like a Euro Cup basketball game. It's pro level basketball that's not much different to the NBA. There is this sense of these teams could compete against U.S. players. A lot of them do on a weekly or daily basis. And, there is a comparable level to where like the NBA, I feel that then can't really have that same, we're going to go into Europe because it's like, one, the European leagues are liked a lot by the people, depending on which country that you're in.
Yeah.
They don't need to watch, the Atlanta Hawks play, the Charlotte Hornets or whatever. There is no reason to when, you have your, like a fan in Greece or whatever who will like literally murder someone if they're not like a Panathinaikos fan or whatever. Like there is that culture already exists. There kind of doesn't need. And I think the last like 10 MVPs of the NBA have like mostly been foreign born.
Yeah.
So
increasingly so.
The NBA kind of doesn't have like the imperialism of basketball doesn't really like work the same way anymore.
Yeah.
Where the inverse of that too is then like a sport that Europe will never have. That is out of the question is baseball, and the U.S. has lost their dominance of baseball years ago. Like it is a sport for Latinos and Japanese people.
Yeah,
and the occasional guy named like Buxton Bryan or whatever who was like
That's
made in
name.
a lab in the Midwest to like
Bryce Harper.
Bryce Harper.
These made up randomly generated white American names.
Clayton Kershaw.
No, it's totally true. I mean, there interestingly, you see the like imperial map coming back to bite American baseball essentially and where it's popular. And I think, baseball and football, especially as you say, because baseball is still, the MLB is incredibly international. It's not the same case with the NFL. I think that's going to be a challenge forever. But I think also, I think Americans are pretty good at like having their cake and eat it too. So like we love being the best at baseball, but like if we lose an international competition, those don't really count and no one cares about them.
Yeah, exactly. Like that was the whole thing with the last World Baseball Classic.
Yeah,
Everyone was hyped on it until Japan won, and then it's like, oh well, actually, we didn't. It's like
it doesn't matter. Our stars weren't there, and it's the same thing with soccer, where very oddly Americans love the women's team because it's really good. But the men's team allows Americans to live out their dreams of being an underdog. It's the one thing where we're still like we tell ourselves we're underdogs in everything, even though we have so much more money and power than everyone else. And soccer, men's soccer at least, is the one time where that's kind of true. So you can like only love winners until you're the scrappy underdogs, and you should be celebrating that you got a draw against Germany or whatever. So I think we're really good at applying whatever mythical like story onto us that happens to fit the exact moment, and things that don't really fit like our perfect narratives either don't count or we can ignore.
Yeah. I mean, I think the thing that'll be interesting to see too, as well, is that then the chain, like I do think it'll be very interesting for especially like the NBA, where then like you have like U.S. sports love the narrative of like the single great player, you know, and I mean, I follow baseball a lot. This person was it was like Mike Trout for like the 2010s. It's now shifting to like Shohei Ohtani, who is not American.
Yeah.
And that is something that then has like actually been very beneficial for the league in a country that then has been, you know, is more baseball pilled than any other country you can imagine with Japan, where like Shohei Ohtani cannot like go outside in Japan anymore.
Yeah.
When LeBron James does retire, there is a very good likelihood that then that the next person to fill his shoes may be a European, with the way that then that a lot of the superstars are looking at, like looking to be. And I think it'll be very interesting to then see what that does to then that type of mentality within a sport that then is still very much like, well, we're still the dominant country. We have LeBron, you know, well, what's going to happen when like, you know, a 22-year-old Balkan child who's like, you know, 7, 8
tall.
Yeah, is going to be that next person. It's very like, I think that'd be very curious to see in that league, because the NFL never will have, it'll always be some, you know, corn-fed American till the end of time. But that is probably the easiest way that then the NBA can then get that leap in popularity that they've kind of all, I mean, Dirk did that for Germany, as we mentioned, but into the sense of like having then that one great player. I guess you have Giannis right now too, who's
there
like,
are, I mean, some of the biggest names in basketball. I mean, as you said, a decade of European MVPs. So we're approaching that. I obviously think the next Braun is Bronny. He's already there. It's pretty clear who that heir is. It's a monarchy. That's how these things work. But yeah, I think that'll be an interesting question. I think obviously it'll have an impact on how the league is marketed abroad and what that means for people living outside of the US. I would hope it would make people maybe slightly more cosmopolitan or thoughtful in the United States. But if I had to guess, it won't.
No, of course not. Yeah. Well, Dave, thank you so much for coming on and chatting about something that we don't get to chat about very often on the show. So that was a very fun change of pace for me. Where can our listeners find you and your work?
Very happy to be here. Thanks for having me. You can find me on Twitter or Blue Sky, I guess, or Instagram, whatever. Pick your poison. I'm occasionally posting annoying content on your social media platforms of choice at Braneck. So just my last name, Braneck. I also have a website where you can find most of my writing and video work.
Cool. Well, thanks again for coming on the show, and we will see you guys on the bonus feed. Take care.
Bye.